Hi everyone, welcome back to Misplaced. This is episode 14. We're very excited to be at this point with this journey. For those of you that haven't tuned in before, Misplaced is a series about food systems and sustainability. We talk about issues within food systems and solutions, and we talk with entrepreneur, activists, and experts like Bertha here with us today. So thanks for joining us. If you want to be reminded of other upcoming episodes, but also see the recordings of prior episodes, do sign up to the series with the link that is in the description of the video. I should also mention that today we are in a very nice venue here in Hong Kong. We are hosted by the Mills Fabrica. They are our venue sponsors. The Mills Fabrica is an incubator, an investment fund, and a community, and they support startups and businesses that innovate in the fields of tech and style, technology and style and lifestyle, in both the apparel and textile fields, as well as food and agriculture. Among the latest incubatees, we have Green Queen Hong Kong, and they will be supporting Green Queen to co-create content, to diversify their insights and grow their platform to reach a wider audience. Most importantly, today we're joined by Bertha Shum from Earthero Project. Hi, Bertha. Thanks for making the time.
Everyone.
Thanks for being here. So before I pass it on to Bertha, I just want to share a little bit about what she does and her amazing project, the Earthero Project, which you should follow on Instagram, by the way, if you have a chance. Earthero Project is a company that partners with businesses that are trying to implement and develop environmental and sustainability initiatives. Bertha has a background in business sustainability management. So if you have questions, remember to ask. And she will introduce us to the importance of collective behavioral change. So I think it's very important in today's episode, after we've talked about so many topics, and we might feel a little bit overwhelmed with all the problems that we've talked about. So Bertha is going to talk to us about how each one of us can make a little bit of difference and how that really makes a big change. So we will talk about misunderstandings and myths in the field of sustainability and creating sustainability strategies for businesses as well. So as I pass it on to you, Bertha, I just want to remind everyone to drop your questions in comments or in the chat, depending where you're following us from. And Bertha will address them in the next 10 to 15 minutes.
Sure.
Thanks for joining us, Bertha.
Thanks for having me. I can share a little bit more about myself and the company first. So actually, I didn't intend to start it as a company. I started this as a blog with my college flatmate, and she and I basically started seeing all these green products in the market, and we're thinking, well, what if I really want to know if it's good for us on the environment? Because obviously, when you're selling a product, you would say it's perfect and it's good and sustainable. So we went on Instagram and searched for any opinions or like shops and talk about it. And the problem we find is, first of all, back 3 years ago in Hong Kong, it wasn't really common for people to find this product yet.
True.
And there weren't any blogs that talk so much about it in a very generic sense, because they're either selling the platform or like they are sponsored by the brand. So we started off just two girls trying new products, and we were writing in English and Chinese because we wanted our audience to be wider. As we were trying these products, we were getting inquiries and questions about, should we try this? Should we try that? Do you have suggestions for makeup and whatever? And then it just developed into this whole blog where I started actually meeting a lot of people in the field. I wasn't in the sustainable field at all. I was actually working in banking and didn't really think much about it. It was a learning process for myself through chatting with people and talking to a lot of people in the field. I realized everyone struggled, including myself. So then, which I started a company last year and just really want to help small and medium companies who maybe don't have the biggest budget, but still want to do something sustainable. And that's what we're doing. And we on the side actually also have a side project doing clothing using dead stock, and everything's based in Hong Kong. So yeah, what we do is around the sustainability, but I also feel like a lot of we talk about is a bigger issue that every day I have struggles myself. So, for example, when you guys first reached out to me and you told me this episode is called Misplaced, and I was like, I know you guys are in food and like talk about agriculture. So I was thinking, okay, how can I relate to that and what I do? And what is really misplaced? Because when we think about sustainability, you meet people, they know so much about it, or you meet people that's just like mind blown by every single thing that you talk about. So the funny thing is, when I first started, I actually have the intention to solve the misunderstanding and the myths in the environment. People in the field could be knowledgeable, but they don't really make it easy to share with people sometimes, because I mean, a lot of people just don't know anything about environment. For example, when I tell my parents, hey, you guys should start recycling, it does matter. And they would say, why? Because first of all, the system in Hong Kong is not great. And second is, it's so far away, I have to walk there. And if it's on the street, you have to wash it, then why bother? Blah, blah, blah. They give me like this whole list of excuses. But the fact is, it matters because only 9% of the stuff in the world is recycled, which means all of them is in the landfill. And I mean, it might be an obvious thing, but when you think about landfill, they are only that amount of space. And what's going to happen when just they run out of space? I mean, in Japan, they burn it, but obviously that doesn't sound good. So that's actually the easiest first step that we can do. And another misunderstanding that we always talk about is sustainable is expensive. And it's yes and no, I think. One of the biggest things that I try to promote and talk about in my blog or even facing companies is that it depends what you do. It could be expensive, it could be cheap. So a very basic example is I started making my own body balm. And I noticed, actually, I started making it because I noticed they're so expensive in the market. When you look for natural, nice, like ones from Aesop or to some organic brand, they can easily be a couple hundreds for a bottle that's like that. And your whole body is, there's so many areas to cover. So I'm making them. I save so much. And each time I can make so many, I can share with friends. And they're just natural ingredients. There's no certificate needed. I'm just melting stuff, freezing them, and just take it out. It's really
a small lab.
Yeah, in my kitchen, like a small table. So it's cheaper that way. But it could also be expensive because when you talk to companies, they need to implement changes from the ground, and they need to pay for example, consultants or outsiders like us, or even third parties to pick up your trash. Then that's an expense. But in the long term, what do you really save is what we're trying to figure out. Because, first of all, I actually think that if you start now, you save in the future because it would be requirement sooner or later. And by then, if you find people to do it, there would be a surcharge. And if you make changes now, for example, swap your lights to LED, or even just start installing solar panels, like I've met some clubhouse, they actually started doing that in the rooftop. And
amazing.
The cost is maybe high at the start, but then they actually calculated it could save electricity.
Yeah.
So it's really, I feel like sustainability, it's not so much more expensive if we look at down the line, but it's more time consuming because you really need to think about it, sit there and see like cost and benefits and stuff. So yeah, that's a very huge misunderstanding. I can go on and on about it, but I'm just gonna stop.
We'll pick your brain on,
Yeah.
on more misunderstanding.
Yeah. Yeah. So other things that I just want to share is through like a misplacement is that people always expect the government to do things, which is perfectly fine and right. So, because after all, they're the bigger voices, they have controls, and corporates will listen to them. It's the small example is like what I said about recycling. They like my parents are like, oh, there are no recycling centers right downstairs. I'm just gonna like whatever. Um, so now the government implemented all these gorgeous like recycle centers. Everyone started going. There are people teaching people how to recycle properly, wash what can be recycled, what cannot. And so yes, that's a big part. But does that mean that we're going to sit around and wait for people to do things? The obvious answer is no. But why is that? It's just simply because I write a blog, be it like there are people read or not, even if there's one person reading or looking at what you're doing, that person could be affected. The greatest example is when I go hiking and I started picking up trash. Whoever walked past would be curious and they're like, oh, what are you doing? You know, like, why are you holding this like barbecue fork and like picking random stuff? And those people then will respond like some people would say, oh, maybe I can do that next time, you know? I'll just pick up a little bit. I can't be bothered to pick up a whole bag. But that matters. And government has the power to make changes on the grand scheme and provide an initiative and space for you to take actions, but you still need to take the actions, you know? So I always talk about it in a blog is we can't just rely on others because then nothing's ever going to change. So yeah, I mean, there are so many, again, like misplacements and misunderstandings of what we can and cannot do. And our existence and our collaborations with like you guys or with different people is really to build that sense where we can do this together. And it's more like a community thing that we're trying to do. So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to like think of examples of what I've done in terms of finding a solution. So I talk a lot about small changes, addressing misunderstandings, and one of the bigger issues that actually is also a struggle that I want to share is when you look at big companies and they tell you, we're doing great, we're doing green, we're going green now. And one of the biggest ones is actually the Shell Twitter. They were talking about how they posted a question. I can't remember exactly the wording, but they're like, what have you done in combating climate change? And what they're doing essentially is being obviously a fossil fuel giant. They wanted to shift the blame to consumers because that's easy. Because most people read it, they're like, oh my God, yeah, what have I done? You know, well, nothing, because if you're reading Shell's Twitter, it means you probably consume. And it's just, there's nothing wrong that Shell exists because it was what we needed. And there was just no technology and not enough investment into renewable energy yet. And people were concealing a lot about the real damages of fossil fuels. We can't really pinpoint one person's fault or one person's like problem in that. But the big problem is a lot of these companies are trying to just deny the fact that they are a huge part of the problem.
And that they have a huge responsibility. Actually, I wanted to add a note on that because just, I think it was yesterday, the media have kind of like published multiple articles on this sentence from a court in the Netherlands that is telling Shell, the oil company, no, you have a legal responsibility now to cut your emissions, CO2 emissions by 45% by 2030, because the Paris Agreement is legally binding, right? And so big companies with big impact have to kind of take initiatives and they're legally bound to do so. Now there's going to be an appeal. We don't know how that's going to end, but I think it's kind of interesting in your topic because the case was initiated by an organization I hope I'm right. I think it's called Friends of the Environment.
Yeah.
And then by 17,000 citizen signatures. So in the big scale of thing, it's not a huge community initiative, right? It's relatively small, but what a big result, because it sets a precedent. And that's great because it kind of aligns with what you're saying. But it also shows that without that justice system that belongs to the government making that step, then we're just sometimes I feel like we're just a bunch of people screaming demands, right?
Yeah.
So that response was kind of necessary. Yeah. I don't know if you have any thoughts or if you had a chance to read about it.
I saw the headline of it and I didn't read into details, but I just think that with this, it actually sets a really good example of companies taking responsibility. And increasingly, I know there's a trend shifting because instead of consumers going crazy and finding sustainable products, a lot of people are now being very critical, especially people in our field, on whether or not the companies are really doing good.
Yeah.
Or is it just a trend? Because obviously, like, the word sustainable is what everyone is trying to claim there are. You create a new product using new things. And is that still sustainable? Is my biggest question. Is that, do we even need that? Because, so the very simple thing is, we recently talked about slow fast fashion.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to the situation where, so Shell is an old company and they did use the most polluting element, and now they're demanded to make changes and they have no choice. And there are these new brands popping up and we're new, but we're tackling the problem in the world. So then they went on and do all these technology and creating all these new products. There's nothing wrong with it because eventually that will replace older, like really unsustainable fast fashion like Zara or like H&M. But the problem is when you create these products and there are a bunch of consumers trying so hard to follow this trend, then they buy like 10 t-shirts, different colors.
Yeah.
And do you really need that? Do you really want that? Is also a big question. So everything, when I think about this and when I talk about it, usually like I just go crazy because everything then goes in circle. Like we talk about government's responsibility, corporate responsibilities. Consumers always take the blame, but it is also a responsibility. So it's very interesting space to look at because it is forcing everyone to rethink what they're doing at the position that you're giving with all these resources. One of the posts that I found kind of went viral recently was that this, I forgot the company name, but they have this bamboo bottle, and then someone just decided they wanted to like open it up, and it was plastic inside.
Oh no!
So they got the biggest backlash, and everyone was now questioning all the companies' ethics and are they really doing good? And it's funny because when I think about it, as a consumer, you're in such a difficult position because you're constantly in the misalignment of information and resources. There's no transparency on most companies on what they do because, I mean, it's also very difficult for them to post every single step online.
Right.
And when you walk into a shop, you buy a product, you can only trust the words on the bottles and on the marketing materials. And our position, or as a company or a media, to talk about these things is to really bring the alignment together. So when we know there's something that is wrong and potentially greenwashing or just very controversial, we are there to talk about it, which is also why I'm a huge, like, whenever brands try to actually talk to me and ask me things like, oh, what do you think of this brand? And I have a new brand, could you promote it? And I have so many questions that some brands would just give up sometimes because
you're too much. Bertha.
Yeah, they're like, I'm sorry, it's okay, we'll do it next time. But then that raised my question. I'm like, why are you not answering my question? And that puts first of all, myself into a crazy state, but at the same time, it helps me identify products and companies that are really doing good. And once I identify those, I go crazy on promoting them. Like people who follow me would notice I actually talk about the same companies and brands so many times just because I believe in what some people are doing and some people are just not with the right state. So yeah, that's basically a whole like very confusing structure of what I do. But what I'm trying to do is really like misplaced is a very good term in terms of what I'm trying to address. I'm trying to put everything into the right place, provide an easy resource for people to really be more sustainable. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for sharing. I think everything is super interesting, and I'm gonna open up then for questions from the audience. But you touched upon so many things, so we definitely have some questions, to get through. So you talked about asking questions, being mindful, thinking about it, investigating. So a lot of it is about consciousness, and I know that it has an important part in what you do. So can you tell us a little bit more about that aspect of what Earthero basically preaches, right?
So at the start, I actually wasn't really thinking too much of the word consciousness or like self-care. I was very focused on more external environmental impact. The more I study into it, I feel like the correlation cannot be ignored. So because being environmentally friendly or being sustainable actually requires a lot of you present in the environment. You can really, your thought process can't really just jump into the consequences because the thought processes is always what I'm doing, what I'm buying, what's applicable, and then next it's like what is it doing to people around me or the environment. So then I started studying and thinking more into consciousness. When I started to learn to be present and appreciate the goods and bads in the environment, it was actually when I was trying to make choices very cautiously. So a very simple example is when I walk into like a supermarket, and I physically I can't go to a bulk buy store all the time. So very natural that I always walk into the supermarket and I really want that one snack. And I guess the consciousness kicks in is I just buy something that's with the least package I can think of, because if you're craving for like Pocky or like the Japanese snacks, you can't really go bulk buy that, and I don't know how to make that. And that's not wrong, like that's perfectly fine. Just buy those, that's not tiny little package. Just buy the box one and recycle the box, throw away the plastic. It's then I feel a little bit more comfortable and less anxiety in what I'm doing. Because when you're running a public blog and you're open to all kinds of opinion, we always get attacks of you're not doing it perfectly. You're not vegetarian, you're not vegan. Oh my God, your picture has plastic. And I'm just thinking, I used to care so much about it, which makes me very anxious in running the blog. I need to look perfect for people who are reading it. But then increasingly, because I care more about my healthcare, my mental health, and the environment, I'm willing to show the imperfect things that I'm doing. Which is why I started a campaign and talking about self-love, because I was doing a lot of yoga. I started doing yoga, and then when the teaching of yoga is very interesting. So my teacher is actually whom I met through the blog. So our Instagram is the Balance Jungle, small plug-in, and she basically talked about how when you practice yoga, you can actually just jump to getting the insta-worthy positions. You actually need to go through the first two stages of learning to, one of them is actually conscious and self-care and the environment, etc. So the mindset is so important where I feel like everything then suddenly, it's like a aha moment for me. Everything just clicks. So what I switched to on the blog is that I want to promote that lifestyle of, it's okay that we live in a fast-paced city, that sometimes you forgot your cup, you need a takeaway cup. It's fine. Like, so sustainability, it shouldn't be a forceful lifestyle. It's supposed to be something that comes very naturally, and eventually, as the society evolves with us, we have better and more sustainable choices.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I feel like sometimes it's a bit unforgiving, the sustainability world, where you have to be 100% perfect, and that's where that eco anxiety that you were mentioning comes up. We've been saying it the whole time since we started Misplaced, step by step, little by little. What counts, what matters, are the biggest part of your habits and of your daily life, right? So like the 80% that you do, not that like 20% where you sometimes maybe break the rules. It's okay. And especially now that products are not so sustainable, products are not so easily available. So totally understand that. And I do love looking at your at your Instagram and seeing like, so especially like I thought the most interesting one was the one for women, right? To use like hygienic sanitary products. Of course, the sustainable options is definitely not always available. I mean, it makes me angry that it hasn't always been sustainable to begin with, because it's not so hard to do, especially considering that we are priced over these things. But that's a perfect example of something that you have to forgive yourself. And the consciousness and mindfulness aspect is definitely very important to the relationship with nature. So I think one of the things that you preach that I want to share with the audience is, the more you spend time with nature, you feel better, but also you understand how important it is to preserve it. So that connection becomes automatic. And I think in a place like Hong Kong, where although it's a fast-paced city, we have easy access to nature, like give yourself that opportunity to take a walk after work and go for a hike, and that's already something that I think makes you more sustainable, and you might not even realize. Right? For sure. Okay, so I think this question is also pretty interesting, and I definitely wanted to ask you, what, for someone like us that wants to make some change, but we don't, maybe someone that doesn't have a business in sustainability and they want to start within their own community, where would you start? Would you start from family? Is it the office? Is it the school? What's the best place for real impact to happen with the first step?
I think it's funny because I thought starting from family is very easy. But it has been so hard for me. I can't even explain. Like, again, anyone,
is mom watching?
Anyone who follows my blog would know my frustration at home is real. Like, I've gone through the whole phase, I think, for a good 2 years, where I explain what I do with the blog to my mom, and she's like, "Oh, cool." And she comes home with like the most packaged stuff ever. Like, I open the fridge, all I can see is plastic bag. I can't even see what's in the bag. And her excuse has always been, it's convenient, like they give it to me. I don't know where to get anything else, blah, blah, blah. To a point where now I basically was nudging them so much that they are so annoyed by me, they would hide what they've done wrong.
I thought you were about to say they kicked you out.
Almost, like close.
Now they hide when you come.
They would actually change a tiny little bit of their behavior, like one less bag at a time. And I thought that's a good progress. But if you want to feel a quicker process, I actually think offices a great start, because a lot of the times in offices, they're not, like, they value convenience, and if you make it convenient for them to do it, they would do it. So when my office first moved to a new place, I immediately bought these recycle bins, and I labeled them, and I blasted the group chats like, "Hey guys, we have a recycle bin now, so wash your cans and stuff and throw it in." And without too much thought and the bins are next to the sink, they actually did do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would suggest to do something very simple, very easy. And then next could be I bought a bunch of reusable lunch boxes in the office. And then they can use that. They still haven't, but it will happen one day.
Step by step.
Yeah, but they use it for snacks and stuff. So I mean, it's small, but I mean, 10 packs of snacks in a box already save like 10 packages.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really recommend that. Workplace and family is always good to start just because it's closer to you. You can nudge them, you can annoy them. And eventually, when people see that you do certain things, they would start following too. Yeah, so
I think it's exactly about what you said, is making that option readily available and show the convenience. So replacing some of the materials with others and just be like, try this one instead. Right?
Exactly.
So I do that at home for sure.
Yeah.
And I have the same frustrations with my partner where like we're so confused where to recycle, and sometimes we kind of like lose patience. But just having the recycling bag with the compartments.
Mm-hmm.
Makes you feel like you have to use it, right?
Yeah, so, exactly. You feel bad that it's empty.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, you just throw everything in the normal bin and we go to landfill. But just having that, the moment I bought it, I knew I had done for once something really smart because it worked, and we do recycle quite a lot. So I think it would be nice to take a question from the audience. We have one from Anahita. Thanks for tuning in. And she's asking about what are your future plans to help businesses?
Interesting, because I have been in discussions with a lot of companies over the past year, and it's been so difficult in getting them to do something, even though I would have listed out, here's all the things you can do at a reasonable like cost, because we're not here to definitely like we need to run a business, but we're not a business that is trying to, can't find a better word, but
like to profit.
We are definitely profiting to be a business, but we want to be a sustainable business in a sense where we can run it at a reasonable cost for companies. So most of the companies feedback initially would be, these are great, like I love the behavioral change, I like the training, I like the workshops. And usually at the end, they would tell me the management told us that sustainability is not the priority now. Or they would be like, oh, we just installed recycle bins in the office, I think it's good. And then there's me looking at that, I was like, interesting. So it's the fact that I really want to help them, and I can see exactly what their problems are. Because typically what I do is I identify their problems, and I will match them with solutions. It could be from me, it could be third party, a lot of which is who I partner with. But they refuse, usually due to sustainability not a priority. And they don't have the money to do it. They did something in-house and they think that already check off the box. Or they just think this is not price competitive, because some solutions, for example, water soluble solution could be more expensive, and they would rather stick with plastic. So my struggle is actually that I really want to help, and usually I give a bunch of free advisor consultation at first, and they're not willing to do it. So what I'm doing alternatively, where I could take more control, is our sub brand. It's called Earthero. We're taking that stock fabric out of companies that have tons of cancel orders, or they have these damaged fabric, maybe half row of them are damaged because of typhoon, and the rest they can use, and we'll take them. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to sell them at a cheap rate to young designers, young brands that would turn them into products that hopefully long lasting and could be used in the future. Obviously, those designers and the brand would have the same mission as we do, which is salvaging trash and turn them into something that's long lasting. So that's kind of in our power, and in the sense that we're helping a more textile fabric related business. But on the corporate side, there's so many restrictions and frustrations that we're still working through. But hopefully, as COVID get better, we can do more about that.
Do you find that a lot of the excuses, and I'll put them in quote, come up because of COVID? Or yeah,
I think it's not entirely because of COVID, because when you talk to them, usually the staff who, for example, is a sustainability manager or someone who has set up a team to do this, they're very enthusiastic and they love the concept. But the problem is when you reach to companies, they just have the sense that this is not urgent.
Yeah.
And this is for marketing.
They it's think not the core business, yes, right?
They actually don't see, a lot of them don't see sustainability as a strategy. For example, comparing it with training your talent.
Yeah.
They don't think sustainability is a must for your business because they just think, oh, it's just another marketing technique or like a PR thing, which is true, of course, if you're doing it right. But then if you're doing it solely for this purpose, then I also don't see my purpose in your business. Yeah. So the question now is an interesting comparison where a lot of activists are talking about is that COVID is such an important thing and it's like hitting you in the face and everyone's like scrambling. Oh my God, health is so important. But then there's climate change, where I just read an article this morning talking about how tree planting would never be enough to offset carbon. So then you're sitting there sweating bullets like it's May, and you're telling me that climate change is not very important. It's not urgent. And I'm just looking at those people. I mean, to be honest, not to be harsh or anything, there's not much point to explain further because they can't really understand until they experience it more.
Yeah.
They can't go ski, they can't like have a nice chill holiday. Exactly. Then they would be like, maybe climate change
when
is
the
happening.
Aircon doesn't cut it anymore.
Yeah, and it's interesting. But again, it's very out of my control in this sense. I can only keep preaching. If they don't want to do anything, there's really that's pretty much it.
Yeah. No, and I think for us it's very similar. At the end of the day, you have to approach and work with organizations that are already a little bit there into prioritizing. Yeah. So we work with schools and we tend to work with schools that have made sustainability a priority to some level, because at least if you can bring these organizations forward and they'll set the example, they'll show also the cost savings from these initiatives and the long-term benefits, right? And then I guess it's going to be interesting to see how law enforcement, like law and like the case of Shell is going to impact other companies, is going to maybe move that to priority.
Maybe.
I think so. If you're facing the court, I guess you'll
whenever they're facing charges, that's when they would do something.
Priority.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we're a little bit over time, so I'll conclude the episode. Thank you so much for this very nice, enjoyable chat. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in and for your questions. As a reminder, we'll see you again next week. And once again, please do fill out our feedback form, because we want to hear from you. And we want to improve, and also you stand a chance to win a gift card from us. So I guess that is it for our 14th episode with Bertha. Thanks, everyone. We will see you next week.